Okay, cool. So yeah, firstly, thanks everyone for coming. I know a lot of you have travelled a long way, Scotland, and yeah. So
Scotland.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and Code for letting us have the space today to do it. So yeah, we're not outside today because there's another meetup, but yeah, hopefully squeeze it all in. And also to Alex and Dom and Jeremy for co-organising, because these things seem to be harder to organise these days. I don't know why, but yeah. And so outside, toilets are outside. So if you go through the main event space and out the door, they're literally opposite. So Neil knows where they are. Yeah, you can be toilet guys. Oh, and fire exits are also there as well, so if you carry on down the stairs, that's where the fire exit is, where you guys come in. And then I also said that I'd do a bit of promo for Code, so they're looking for 5 freelancers for a project that I think is starting in July, so if anyone's a freelancer like me, works for Sitecore, then yeah. And then lastly, the agenda. So yeah, this is all gone to pot, what is it? But yeah, hopefully we'll get cracking now. Matt's first up, so we're about 50 minutes late. So yeah, add 15 minutes onto all those timings. Alright, cool.
Thank you. For those who don't know me, which is most in this room, my name is Matt Knowles. I'm at EPAM Systems, formerly Think, where Timothy was my first technical director there, and the first guy I worked with on a Sitecore project ever was Mr. Rosslow over there. So this is absolutely terrible. It's his fault, it's nothing to do with me. So anyway, start the time and start keeping a track on this. So I'm going to be looking at, oh, what the hell is that there? Okay. So start point with what we're going to look at. We had an old school SXA site, massive old school SXA site, 3 tenants, 14 sites on that tenant, the largest site of which, north of 100,000 pages, 400 plus content editors, external search integration from an in-house search supplier that was heavily reliant on Sitecore setups, branch templates all over the shop to try to standardise our page designs, our layout, and very integrated page workflow. They wanted to migrate, obviously, the assets into Content Hub, which is how everyone gets to Content Hub, and then CMP kind of came onto the scene, and the client's idea was to basically use CMP as a page editing tool. Almost use CMP as a CMS. About a year before Sitecore came with the idea, and that's where Sitecore are going now, seemingly. What issues did we have? Well, we had loads of taxonomies within the Sitecore sort of structure that drove search, as we'll all have had thousands of times. Obviously, you have a Content Hub instance, you need to bring this into there, you need to figure this out. You have externals of people, a large number of external people who are authoring. We want to get those out of Sitecore, because having that number of simultaneous editors in Sitecore becomes expensive quite quick. Having it in Content Hub CMP, far cheaper, far easier. You can tie them down far more. But we wanted to tie this into one nice, smooth, streamlined workflow where authors are responsible for content, Sitecore, there's your Sitecore editorial team, A/B testing, all the stuff that Sitecore gives you on top of that. So Sitecore gives you out of the box a CMP connector, which does some things, and some things is probably the correct definition of what that connector will do. It pretty much will bring across text fields. If you tag these using the Sitecore and the tagging mechanism, it will do that, but pretty much anything else it won't. It it's designed as an item to item. So they want you to bring in data items via CMP and ingest them that way. We're heavily involved in branch templates, so the data is held at that level. We wanted to effectively have CMP items as pages. And also, it's basically a one-way sync apart from usage. We wanted to manage the taxonomies and push the taxonomies both ways. So a little bit of gap analysis. I'll not bore people senseless because I'm pretty much sort of covered it off and I'm good at boring people senseless. So, but that, and we also wanted to, which I forgot-ish, that would be the beer, but we wanted to maintain Sitecore item versioning. You bring things across from CMP, you add a new version of CMP, it overwrites. You want to maintain versioning, that's no good. And we also wanted at a field level the ability to lock not items but individual fields within items, and only for the page items that have been brought across from CMP. Because we're bringing across CMP items, we have a very large number of same items, same subtemplates, same underlyings of data, where the source of it is Sitecore itself. If you lock those, how do you edit them? You beat them. So, long story short, what do we need to do? We need to produce an export pipeline. Loads of taxonomy items in Sitecore, just our data items the traditional way. We need those in CMP, we need them to match up. So we need to write an export pipeline. Don't know what that there means. I wrote it and stuff, I probably should, I apologise. I do know what it means, but I hadn't added it in. But we need to make those items that we've exported searchable, linkable via CMP. So we need then basically, so we have in the structure we had certain sorts of pages become effectively taxonomy items for other pages. So for sake of argument, you have a page that is this is the worldwide expert on this subject. You have a subset of several hundred news items, but they link back. You want those to sort of tie up in search, linking back to, and he is the expert. Again, all of this is in Sitecore. You need to sort of tie this up into CMP and make this work. Very quick, I will rattle through this stuff. So we produce an export pipeline. All the code for this is available. I will set up links, so I'm not going to do a code show and tell, and plus there's people in this room who would make me feel bad for it, so it's the way it is. Let me sign back in because it's kicked me out. So within Sitecore you have, and this is a very, very limited subset, very, very small sets of data, just so we can rattle through this sort of stuff. So, but this is a sort of example of the sort of things we have. You have like a location subfolder. You link data item news items to relevant geographical locations. This is how, and you have a relevant, like a taxonomy in CMP that you want this to populate in. So export pipeline, a little bit of PowerShell and so calling the APIs, and hopefully this still works. It did a month ago and I haven't looked at it since. What we should see is, yes, excellent. Things start to populate in CMP, you get those items in CMP, they become available for your CMP editors, and it keeps this in sync. You can then flip it round, because you want, for every item you want one single source of truth, of course. So you can flip this round. Once this is complete, you change the direction of this sync. This is now managed in CMP, and then you change in CMP as a taxonomy, push straight into Sitecore. Problem relatively solved. I'll let that run through while I drop into not my Jira board. That's totally not what we should be looking at. When we drop back into the next item, which is the branch terminal item. So obviously, as I said, we want to use CMP as a page editing tool, not as a data editing tool. All of our page items are set up based on branch templates with all the extra stuff you get of having data items as opposed to your data directly on the items, makes testing easier, all that stuff that you want. We want to in relation to that, add values into local data, make image editing more work in CMP in a more WYSIWYG way. So effectively, you edit as if you're editing a page, whereas the traditional CMP way, you add images, you add video as assets against the thing, and it brings it across and it links it. Yes, it would work. Yes, we could re-engineer the Sitecore solution, but we want everything we had existing to work. We just spent 3 years and God knows how much to get into that position. What on earth was that? But we had to have it to work this way. So hopefully, okay, that is done. Quite thank God. So obviously, all those items are refreshed. This should be brought across. As we see, we have that moving very quickly on. So what we want to be able to do is, here's one I prepared earlier, is to be able to have a work item where you edit it in CMP effectively like this. And this is a very slimmed down version of what we were doing in reality, but it kind of works for this. But you can edit, if you press the edit option first, it's always helpful. You edit the fields effectively in line. This is much closer to the Sitecore experience editor page editing experience that most people are used for. You can push this out to an editor, and you can say, so this is, they can do this. They can look at what they want, what they see, and that will work. I'll just quickly. Obviously, we expanded quite a lot the pipeline for imports. Browser in the content tree for 2 seconds. So we added a load of. That's config. I apologise. We added a bunch of extra types. That link to local branch items, that will parse out the image from the text fields, that will do all of that stuff to allow you to have that text editing experience the way it is. Just make sure this import is turned on, otherwise this next thing will be absolutely abysmal because it just will do absolutely nothing. So hopefully take this down the pipe. Yeah, of course. So obviously what we do is we bring the image in, we bring the data across like also connected does, but we link to the data item, we spin up a branch, we populate the local data, we parse out images from the HTML that you get via the connector, and with a little bit of luck it drops into a page item exactly as you need. So having solved that problem, next problem is you want that single source of truth. Thankfully it has worked. You want the single source of truth. So what you want to do is determine, because you want the data that's come from CMP is run by CMP, but you have a news page, you have a news article, your SEO experts, your content experts, they want to be able to add other things into this. They want to be able to perhaps add a related section, test that, all these different things. So what we had to do was figure out how to tie down those important items, but only the relevant bits of this item that have come from CMP. So we need to be able to change that field, just to pick something completely random, but the text that has come from the data that's come from CMP, you sort of cannot change at all. And I'm open of Experience Editor because we only have 6.5 minutes, and Experience Editor will take 6.5 minutes to open. But obviously the same thing follows through there. And that's the thing I've just done. And that's something else I've just done as well. Okay, so yeah. Oops. Field level locking, yes. Sorry, I've rattled through this incredibly fast. So the current workflow that we were moving away from was all those editors who were sending stuff in were, I have a news item, they were drafting it by email, sending it into a core team of 30 to 40 sort of people who really knew Sitecore inside out. So we wanted, obviously, the client to move away from that, pass this out to their worldwide, authoring set. They do their thing in CMP. CMP passes it in, and it works. So the next thing, the final thing, I've gone very, very fast, and I'm going to try and get this in the right order. I will get to the demo slide, then show the demo. It helps. Is workflow. So obviously CMP has a workflow, Sitecore has a workflow. Different sets of users. You want to keep everyone wants to know where everything is. You want to minimize the communication that's required. You want to maximize the user friendliness and the flow. And it's going to be better than sending emails backwards and forwards saying, when's this item going out? Why isn't it on the website yet? So again, just nice basic communication between systems. Added in various sort of workflow actions, so to allow communication between the two systems. Workflow in CMP is just a field. It's just a relation field, update, change, whatever you want. So by pushing this down the workflow using the flow, I always lose track of this. Just how does workflow in here? There we go. That's the one. You can tell I very seldom edit things in Sitecore anymore. Or I log in as an administrator all the solid time, to figure out how this stuff works. By pushing stuff down the pipe, we just invoke a workflow action that calls back to CMP, and with a bit of luck, does something. Damn it. 3.5 minutes yet left. Are we going to get there?
Okay, you got a bit longer.
Oh. Sitecore, external hard drive, and Docker all at the same time. This is going to be good.
The demo gods.
Yes, I didn't praise it beforehand, did I? But ultimately, this triggers a workflow action, and this workflow action sends back to here, updates the workflow state. God knows what's going on. If it's worked, great. If it hasn't, there you go. It has worked. I don't know what Sitecore is doing in the background, but that has triggered. And I'm not going to do it again to show the publish thing because we've only got like 20,000 years left to live, and God knows what's going to happen. But that's the two workflows tied together. I will let that do whatever that is going to do. And yeah, thank you very much. I managed to gain us 90 seconds back on our time by talking fast and only swearing once. So
you've got 5 minutes to have questions. So
yes, floor is yours.
So how much of the change there is config versus code?
It's both pipelines are completely rewritten. So the import and the export pipeline, based on what Sitecore provided, but the two pipelines are completely new. Supplied back to Sitecore, who are looking to integrate. I was told it's Igor. I can never pronounce his surname. It begins with an L. I can never pronounce it so correctly. I'm not going to try. Who are integrating a lot of this, looking to integrate a lot of this in, particularly the branch template stuff, because it gives a lot that they don't currently have. And obviously there's then just the configuration to patch in the pipeline as opposed to just the Sitecore way, that's...
Yeah, so all that custom code is running in Sitecore, not in the content hub.
Yes, there is, I didn't show this, but there is a few extra workflows in Content Hub that we added, but that's more, what we did was we tied that into the, so for instance on the workflow stuff, when a page was actually published, depending on the page type, we wanted to send out like sort of tweets that a news item had been sort of published. So that was then custom coded in the listen for the Sitecore action of the workflow state change to push out to a like an Azure function to basically hit sort of Twitter and send that. So yes, there's some Sitecore additional things added in as well, and obviously the adding the items into CMP. There is some custom things in gestation to make sure it goes into the correct place and it maintains the hierarchical structure that we had in Sitecore that isn't handled in quite the same way in CMP.
Any other questions? So if I understood correct, you've got almost page entities in Content Hub.
Say again, sorry?
If I understood correct, you've got page entities effectively in Content Hub.
Yes.
That was right, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I think you were saying that you've got taxonomy entities acting as pages effectively.
Yes.
And so if someone wanted to consume that content as a service from Content Hub,
Yes.
What limitations would there be on that?
Effectively, almost none. So the structure is as I kind of perhaps didn't do this massively so clearly. So you have a system, you have a structure where in the old Sitecore system, you had a page to say this person is a global expert in thoracic medicine, say, and you want to tag. You want to be able to tag news pages, or I keep saying news, but one of many different page types that are created. You want to tag that against that expert. So what effectively was done is you create the expert page in Sitecore, because that's obviously you have a very limited number of experts, but you have a massive number of news pages. So what you want is when you add the expert into Sitecore, you push enough into Content Hub so that becomes selectable as a taxonomy, like a searchable taxonomy, both in Content Hub and in Sitecore. Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah, I think so, but that would effectively mean that if you wanted this content as a service scenario, you'd still need Sitecore to give that additional information to send back to CMP. Would that be right?
Until it's created. Once it's created, it becomes something in CMP.
Okay.
I didn't show this massively, but you link up certain fields. So both ways. So your taxonomies in CMP are relatively lightweight things. Sorry, your taxonomies in Content are relatively lightweight things. You have maybe 4 or 5 fields. It's a taxonomy. So if you update, say, the name of the expert, that would get pushed back. So that's still managed in Sitecore. Effectively, if you want to, that gets pushed back and updated, which then updates all the links in Content Hub. but effectively it can be sort of disconnected. You could effectively just go, we want all these 50 people to become a taxonomy call experts in Content Hub, send, switch that connector off, job done, or you can reverse that connector. So when you add an expert as a taxonomy in Content Hub, it pushes down the bare bones of the page. Obviously you still have to flesh it out because you're not going to put, you know, their life story as a taxonomy, but it pushes that expert out as a page where it becomes content in Sitecore to be filled out and pushed as a page.
But you've got one item in Sitecore that is for expert, but you've got an entity in Content Hub that's a page, and an entity in Content Hub that is a taxonomy.
Yes.
As well. So that it's split the data, effectively.
So you've got okay. I'm doing a bad job explaining. So you create the page in. So you have one page in Sitecore that is that experts' resumes, you know, their biography, say.
Yeah.
That is pushed up to Content Hub as a taxonomy. So the fields that you want as a taxonomy become that taxonomy. The other pages link to that person as a taxonomy. So the pages that are created are, you know, are your news pages, are your recommended insights or pages for sake of arguments. They link back to that, and because all the identities hold true, that links to the page in Content Hub, in Sitecore. Sorry,
there isn't an article page for the expert in Content Hub. There's just the taxonomy entry.
There's just the taxonomy. So you don't create a page in Content Hub that gets pushed, but you want to use what is that page as a taxonomy in other sort of pages. Does that explain it a bit? It does.
Are you limited what personalisation you would like? The source of truth comes from CMP, and then that's all being fed down to a relatively flat data source. Are you then limited what personalisation you can apply to the outside?
Not at all, because basically what we have done is when the data comes down, you effectively, that data is owned by Content Hub. So you don't want to, or the client doesn't want to personalise the text of a news page, say, or the header or whatever. What they might want to do, and what they do is say, right, on these pages we add, you know, a component that will search based on A, B, and C, or will search on the persona of the person.
You can't personalise the content that comes from.
No, you can't personalise the. I mean, you could allow that to be unlocked, but effectively, what comes from Content Hub is like the text of a news article, not anything marketing driven. It's so the information as it works comes from sort of Content Hub, but all the, I keep calling it sort of marketing fluff, I probably shouldn't, but you know, the stuff that drives money that gets us all paid, that being unimportant stuff, you know, all that can be added in as separate components into the page, or personalised, whatever you want to do with it, so that you get the AP experience on all of those things.
If you wanted something to move on to other questions after this.
I'm sure you can grab Matt for questions.
See the steam in the
You've not long enough to know how stressed I get.
Have you got a contact with Neil?
Oh, well.
So the next talk is from Neil, and he's in America, so he's not going to be actually here. So we've got some technical. Yeah. So if everyone just wants to grab a drink. So yeah, I've got to dial him in. But if everyone wants to have a little comfort break, grab some pizza, grab a drink. Probably need to be back here by 7:10 at the latest. If that's all right. I think we've just about managed this. So yeah, so Neil's going to talk to you about composing DXP with Sitecore, all the way from I'm on the beach somewhere now.
Yeah, I'm currently just off the coast of Georgia, a little island called St. Simon's. Took a little vacation with the family over here, and I'd already accepted to present to you guys. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's raining here. Oh, it's a little bit better.
No, it's 29 degrees here, and the sun is splitting the trees, so beautiful.
Go for it now.
All right, so yeah, so this is my session from SUGCon. It's titled Composing the DXP with Sitecore. And really, the idea behind this session, we're going to take a look at Sitecore's newly acquired tools, Order Cloud, CDP, and Send. And the goal of this really is to help developers who may not have had a chance to look at any of these products yet, and to help them get up and running with the solution that they can play around with. So I apologize, there's lots of QR codes. So lots of the various topics, I'm just going to skim over them, but there's QR codes which will link back to my blog where I've gone deeper and show you how to do the various things and set up some of these things. So I'll just get going. Yeah, so as Sitecore is busy acquiring all these various tools, 451, Boxever, Mooseend, and Reflection, I was thinking to myself, okay, what does this mean for me as an implementer, and what does it mean for our clients? I'm going to be getting asked questions from our salespeople, and I want to be able to answer those and trying not to feel too overwhelmed, thinking, where do I start? Where's the best place to start? So I was working on a Sitecore SAP Hybris implementation integration project. So it kind of made sense for me to look at Order Cloud first. And also, I was quite impressed with the documentation that it had. And then also I was able to spin up a free account and take that for a run. And having the free account, I was able to poke around in the marketplace, poke around in the back end, use the console API, create a marketplace. And then I discovered their Git repo and some of the developer tools that they had available there. One in particular caught my attention, and that was Order Cloud Head Start Next.js. Sitecore Symposium and the virtual summit had just finished, and so there was quite a bit of hype about Vercel, Next.js, and those kind of things. So that's why I was quite intrigued about this. I never looked at Next.js or Vercel before I'd heard about it, obviously at Symposium, so I was quite intrigued. Following the documentation, I was able to, and it's a simple buyer application, right? And it doesn't look glamorous or anything, but it teaches you how the APIs work with Order Cloud. It shows you how to seed Order Cloud with some sample data, which helped me understand the data structures better. I kind of learned by doing, right? It's fine reading the documentation, but it's much better if you have something that you can play around with. So I was able to get the Next.js app up and running locally, really straightforward, worked first time, and I was amazed. And then it showed me how to deploy that to Vercel. And I was blown away at how quickly I could get an application that ran first time and deployed out to Vercel, and it was fully integrated with Order Cloud. And just that simplicity of getting a solution onto a public URL that I could show to people was amazing. I was like, this is a bit of a game changer, just the simplicity of it. So as I continued to look around and poke around in Vercel, I discovered the Next.js Commerce Order Cloud, Next.js Commerce template, project template that they had, and they had also just integrated it with Order Cloud. So I was like, okay, let's take this for a spin, because it looks nice. It looks much better than the Head Start site as well. It's styled really nice and everything. So I started playing with that, and there's a setup wizard, and the wizard guides you through forking. Basically it forks the commerce project that they have created, Next.js Commerce, and it forks that into your Git repo, and then it deploys it out to Vercel. And then after that, you can then integrate Order Cloud. There's a second process where you then add the integration for Order Cloud. And what that does really is you can either connect to an existing marketplace if you have one, and it will seed that, or you can create a new marketplace and it will seed that with sample data. It's a clothes shop where you can buy various like hats and things like that anyway. But so it seeds it, and then it creates all the environment variables for you, and it takes care of the process, and it just worked seamlessly. 5 minutes, I had a fully functional e-commerce site up and running where you could go through, add products, search for products, add them to cart, that kind of thing, and check out. And I was really impressed with it. Since then, there's been various blogs written about it. I've written one myself, and then Rob Earlham, he's created a really nice video tutorial of it that walks you through this process. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend checking it out, or any of those other posts that are out there. But it is really straightforward and simple. One thing I did find is that I got it then working locally. I want to check it out and work with it locally as well and spin that up. And it worked first time, but subsequently, with it being an open source project, when I went to look at it again, I thought, well, there's been some changes to it. I'll get the latest version. I ran into some problems just trying to get it working locally. It worked fine if I deployed it out to Vercel, but just getting that running locally, there were some issues with it. I was able to work through those. The Git repository, there's conversations on there tracking those various issues and some solutions. And Miguel Mandolo has actually walked through those issues as well and shows you how to fix them too. They may be fixed by now. I'm not sure. I haven't got the latest copy recently, but it's something I've been kind of playing around with locally and on Vercel. But it's a great solution. If you've not had a chance to look at it, I highly recommend it. So shortly after that, I was asked then, hey, Neil, have you got any capacity to take the Sitecore CDP personalized deep dive training? Now, at the time, this was a week long training with some theory at the start of the day, and then they set you some labs. It was with Sarah O'Reilly. They set you some labs, and you go off by yourself and work through those labs, and then come back at the end of the day and present what you had done and ask questions if you had any issues. They don't currently run that training anymore, but the recorded sessions is what's available on Sitecore's learning and training site. But it was a really good opportunity for me to get my hands on Sitecore CDP and personalized. Previous to that, I had done the box ever training, and I was kind of like a bit lukewarm about it, because it's completely different now. If you've had a chance to play with it, it looks different. It's branded towards Sitecore, whereas the training before, it was very click and lots of reading documentation, whereas this is a real opportunity to get some hands-on experience, some real practical tips on how to use CDP and personalize in the real world, various use cases, and also it gave me there's a Slack channel, and other people who had been through the training and the people that were on the training at the same time as me, we were able to ask each other questions and things like that. But I came away from that session really excited, kind of like a kid on Christmas morning that I'd just been given some new toys to play with. And I couldn't wait to see how I could integrate it with the Next.js commerce site that I had running, because a lot of the scenarios that they use on the training is around e-commerce sites, and we kind of create a site locally, and adding things to cart and stuff like that. But I was like, oh, I'd really like to see how I could integrate this with the Next.js commerce. So thankfully, I wasn't too familiar with Next.js and React. I'm more back-end developer. I haven't had a lot of experience with those front-end tools and things like that. So, but thankfully, Sitecore CDP and Personalize has 3 ways of integrating, Google Tag Manager, Direct Client Script, and server-side scripting. So for me, it seemed like a sensible approach to go with the Google Tag Manager. It was a low code, no code approach. I could create a tag on Google, and then using the React GTM module, I could then install that into the Next.js commerce solution. And with a few lines of code, I was able to then start personalizing the site. And if you click if you scan that QR code, it'll take you through the details on how I did that. So as I progressed and started poking around with the solution, the Next.js commerce solution, I was like, okay, I'd like to apply more of the learnings that I had, that I picked up during the training, and look at the direct client script. And I'd started building up a library that allowed me to send events to Sitecore CDP and personalize. And I was like, well, this would be really useful, maybe not just for Next.js commerce, but for other solutions as well. And I really like the Google Tag Manager approach, that I could add a module from NPM, and all of a sudden I was able to, start tracking with Google Tag Manager. I thought, well, it would be good if I could do something similar. So I created the React Sitecore Personalize module. And what this does is it's a wrapper around the direct client script, and allows you to send various events to Sitecore Personalize and CDP. With a few lines of code, you can add this module to any React or other solutions, because it is just built using JavaScript and React. And there's no dependencies on React, should I say. It's JavaScript and TypeScript. So what this allows you to do, obviously you initialize the script just with a line of code, install it, then initialize it with a single line of code. And then you can, throughout the user's journey, you can track various events. the view event when the user views a particular page, add event when they add a product to their cart, and the confirm event to confirm the products that are in the cart, checkout, payment when they make a payment, and then send identity. You can identify the user, and there's a few other changes since this. I mean, I've been really lazy. This is the presentation I did at SUGCON, but there's been a few changes to the module since then, and there's been some members in the community have got involved with it as well. So if there's something that you see there that's missing, there was a few events that were missing, and we've been adding those and different things, and maybe fix a bug or two as well. But I'd recommend checking it out. And let's see. So during the CDP deep dive training, one of the things that they taught us was how to send a user an email when they had abandoned their cart. And that was the scenario that they used. And so they were teaching us how to use decision models and data connections. And it surprised me that they were using MailJet for this process of sending the emails. And I was like, hang on a minute. Sitecore's got Musend now. Why wouldn't we use that? So I came away with the training of thinking, okay, how can I utilize Sitecore Send to send emails rather than MailJet? And I used the scenario of a user signs up for an email campaign. They register to say receive discount emails. That was the scenario that I went with. And if you scan that QR code, it'll show you how I went about doing that. You know, I had to set up a few experiences, a triggered experience, and some of this stuff is on the Sitecore CDP exam as well, if you've decided to go for that. So rather than using MailJet, when the user signs up for an email campaign, what it would do is it would assign them to, it would send a request to Sitecore Send, and it would add them to a mailing group, where then you could then use Sitecore Send to distribute emails to that group. And so it's fairly straightforward to do, but just to wrap your head around it, it obviously took a little bit figuring it out, but yeah. So what we end up with then is obviously we've got the site running, and products are coming from Sitecore Order Cloud, and it's running Next.js Next.js Commerce template running on Vercel, and we've added box ever integration, so that Sitecore CDP and Personalize is being integrated with the direct client script, and then we've added some integration through Sitecore CDP and Personalize and through to Musend, send them some data connect. So whenever someone signs up, it sends that data through to Musend. So let's do a quick demo. Let's see. Okay. So here's my site. Hopefully you can see it okay. If I hit F12. So as I click on various products, you can see here I'm right now to the console, and this is, I just sent a view event to Sitecore CDP and Personalize, and I have this browser ID. Now, if I grab that browser ID, I can stick that into Sitecore CDP and Personalize to find out about this user. But then what I'll do is I'll add a product to the cart. So we've got a product added to our cart. You can see there. So I've got a view event, and then I've also got a send add event. So I've added a product to the cart, and I've sent that through to Sitecore CDP and Personalize. If I go over to CDP and Personalize, here we are here, customer data, guests. I'm going to search for this guest. Basically, to find a guest, we grab that GUID, we type in VID, and paste it in. And so here we are, here's a visitor, they're first seen 1 minute ago. If I click on this, I can see the various activities for that particular user. Click on timeline. And here's the session. They've got one session at the moment. And this is what they've viewed this bomber jacket page, and they've added the product to their cart. So let's go back then to the session. We'll proceed to checkout, which is confirming the products that are in the cart. Now I could go ahead and add in the payment details and shipping address and things like that. And if you wanted to, you could add an email address here to identify the user as well, using that as an identifier. And we'll just confirm purchase and checkout. So obviously I've made some changes so that I can check it without filling in all those details and enable that button. Just kind of getting around that a little bit. So if I go back to Order Cloud, or sorry, CDP and personalize, refresh, and view the session. So you can see here, so the order was confirmed and the purchase, and they completed the purchase. If we go back, and I'll show you the integration with Sitecore Send. So I've added, basically, I think it's to here. Yeah, so basically, you know, subscribers receive offers. So there might be a discount on the mask page that will pop up here, and then you present them with some, you know, with an experience to say, hey, if you want to subscribe to receive more offers, sign up. So I'll just sign up as a user. Submit. Now, hopefully we should see that come through if we go back to, if we go back here and refresh. So we got they subscribe to the email offer campaign. And if we go to send over here, I go to audiences, email lists, receive discount offers, view all members. And there we have Adams come through to Sitecore Send and been added to this email listing. I could go into a lot more detail on the various integrations and how I've done that, but I'm going to keep it short. I think you guys are running behind time. So let me just switch back to the deck. So one other thing that I've been working on is some Postman collections. So I've created a Postman collection for Mooseend and one for Sitecore CDP and Personalize. You can check those out. And then Sitecore Order Cloud, they've got a really, they've already got a good collection that you can import into Postman already. I've kind of got a blog post on how to make that a bit more easier to work with, and variables and stuff you can use. So I should have that out pretty soon. And they've also got a really good tutorial as well on how to use the Postman collection. I highly recommend. That's what that link will take you through. If you're thinking about doing the Order Cloud, I did the exam last week. This was a real help to me. I mean, I've read through the documentation and I've been playing with it, but this was really helpful for me in understanding the various APIs. Basically, it walks you through setting up a coffee shop, B2B and B2C, and it was really helpful just to understand the various, just to go a bit deeper on the various APIs that are involved with that. Yeah, so I recommend checking those out. And that's it for me. Obviously, here's my contact details. If you've got any questions, certainly reach out. Hand it back to you, Adam.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
If there's any questions.
Mike's not that good.
Yeah, so I'm just going to see if anyone in the room's got any questions. I can repeat into Neil for you.
Is that React example site a starting point for your actual product, or is it just examples to get inspiration from?
Yeah. Did you hear that, Neil, or do you want me to?
I didn't quite hear that. What was the question?
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but is the React example site just like an example that?
Would you base a real site?
Okay, yeah. So is it fit for purpose for a real site or not really?
I believe it is fit for the project template that Vercel have provided. I think it is fit for purpose. It obviously it integrates with a lot of other well-known commerce engines as well. Shopify, commerce. What else? There's a few. There's several tools that it integrates with. I mean, would it be the approach that you would take? You'd have to weigh that out for yourself, right? If it fits the customer's requirements, but yeah. But it's really good for figuring things out and learning from, I think. And it was an interesting process as well, because going with the Head Start Next.js, I think that is, you know, it's showing you how to work with Order Cloud, and that was taking it from working locally to deploying it out to Vercel, whereas the template project, it's going from Vercel and it's up and running easily on Vercel. But if you run into any issues, you're like, oh, whereas I had the experience of working with the Head Start, getting it working locally first, and then deploying it out to Vercel, which is probably the path you'd most likely go if you're developing something locally. So yeah, but I would recommend checking both of those out, just to wrap your head around how some of the integrations and stuff work. That answers the question.
Thanks very much, Neil. Yeah, I think we're probably call it a day there, but thank you very much.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for having me. Take care.
So now he's going to present on his journey with Sitecore, MVC to JSS.
Hi all, myself Nagadesh, and this is my journey or my experience from a legacy MVC system to a Sitecore JSS Sitecore. And going into the agenda, I will give a brief intro of what JSS is and the deployment strategies, how we had gone about REST and GraphQL of JSS, and then the migration activities that we have done for MVC to JSS, and the pipeline extensions or the customizations which we have to opt for this migration. Firstly, the first few bits of slides would be very common as you find. Let me put some thoughts on the JSS. JSS is the SDK which Sitecore produced as a Sitecore only, which is a headless part of their headless initiative. And Sitecore openly supports, the JSS supports both Angular, React and Vue. And these are the major components of the JSS, like the JSS library, which is the npm package, and the Sitecore layout service, which is an REST or graph supported service, and Sitecore Vue inject, which takes control of the rendering part of the JSS, and the import application. The import application comes in handy when we go for code first approach of JSS. What do we mean by code first and Sitecore first? Let me take a glimpse of it. Like JSS provides us with two approaches. One is a code first and the second is the Sitecore first. Like when to opt for one or the other. If you are going for a brand new site, then if you are short of Sitecore developers, then we can opt for code first, where UI developers or front-end developers can lead the activity. And Sitecore first. This is opted when we have an already created system or a legacy system where you have all your IA ready, templates are there, view renderings or the controller renderings are already in place, and you want to migrate from an MVC to a Sitecore JSS. Now this is the basic structure of Sitecore JSS, where you have a layout service, you have a node service or a node server running on a similar instance, or you can make it a proxy server, which I would be going on to the deployment strategies. And while throughout this journey, we had thought how we can deploy our JSS as part of the Sitecore. These are the out-of-the-box topologies or the strategies that we have opted for, or rather JSS providers. Kind of the integrated topology, where you have on a single instance, you have your Sitecore and node server on a single instance, both on the content publishing as well, on the CD as well. Whereas headless proxy, Sitecore and Node.js server are decoupled, and Node acts as a proxy. And for better production, or where you want performance as a priority, there are two other options where you go for CDN with client-side rendering, where CDN to serve the static asset to the end user, offload the app rendering to the browser, and we use layout service as for the personalization data. And CDN with SSR is something like CDN with server-side rendering. We use CDN to serve the pre-rendered app to the end users, and a callback to the layout service will be done for the personalization data. Now, going into details of how does this work. Like in integrated topology, the CM will be as such like authoring and the node server on the single server, and the CD will be set up like your end user, load balancer, or the CD. The pros of this would be like by default JSS provide this one, but when we go for the downside of it, both node and CD in terms of Sitecore shares the same CPU, and it is not recommended for high scale of the high traffic. And in terms of caching, it's all or nothing cache if you opt for this topology. And going to the headless one, over here you have node as a proxy in between your CD. In terms of CM, it's more or less the same setup, but in terms of CD, you will have 2 node servers or n number of node servers, where you can have a load balancer in front of your CDs as well. Now, the good part or for this headless approach is the pre-rendered HTML and good for SEO. And your CD would be for good security, and you can scale as much as you need for the node server or CD separately in this topology. Now coming to the 2 parts of it, where how does JSS perform better in terms of MVC. Now over here we have 2 parts. One is the layout service, which the CD is responsible, and the app rendering, which the node and the browser is responsible. In terms of performance, what we have observed was layout service scales better than MVC, the normal MVC. If you are opting for server-side rendering, but mostly client-side rendering is preferred, but if you opt for server-side rendering, it's worse than MVC for consideration. And the other 2 options while we go for performance is CDN with client-side rendering topology. How does this work? The CM setup is as such like on the CM you have a node server, and it generates the asserts where you host those index.html and JS to a CDN. And from the client side, you have the JS app assembled to the client side on the page. On the initial page load, the asserts are being loaded from the CDN, and we use layout service to personalize the data. And what advantages we have in terms of the speed improvement? Because of the virtual DOM loading on the browser, lighter load on the CD. In terms of cost, don't require a node server in that CD topology where we don't have any node server. We are directly rendering from the pre-rendered app. And the additional cost is the development cost, where you have to develop or customize Sitecore in such a way that you put all your assets to the CDN. The concerns over here was SEO will be a concern unless someone doesn't care for Google. Now, how to implement is something like onto the CD, push the pre-rendered up to the CD onto the this is a node topology with server-side rendering. Onto the server-side rendering, the only difference was the pre-rendered, rather than the static files, you push the pre-rendered app to the CDN, or build or publish events. Onto the CD, it works as same as the client-side rendering, but the only difference is that it loads the pre-rendered app rather than the static files. What advantages we have is kind of the speed improvements. Again, the same node server is not available on the CD. The CD does as a headless app over here. Cost, no extra development. Now the second consideration of the layout service is it works both with REST and GraphQL. For this part, these are the pros and cons of it. Like if you opt for REST, it is the similar as both are HTTP, but you have to call multiple times for each and every request. In terms of GraphQL, since it is a query long list, you should be able to query any resource of the Sitecore item tree. And for Swagger as well, REST doesn't provide that support. With GraphQL, you readily have it. Now coming to the migration activities, how it has been done. There are, as Sitecore depicts it as templates, data and presentation. This is where the changes have been done for both server-side pages and the client-side pages. Coming into the migration activities, how we have achieved this. It starts with the, okay, I have a legacy system where I want to migrate an MVC based architecture to a Sitecore JSS based. It starts with the app start path of my Sitecore app, the dictionary service that Sitecore JSS provide, and the placeholder changes. Sitecore JSS with the layout service doesn't opt for simple. If you have hierarchical dynamic placeholder which is not dynamic, Sitecore layout service doesn't produce the outcome. So the first migration we have done was converting my simple placeholders to a dynamic placeholders. Like this is the layout service, which you can see that like the placeholders are kind of header, footer, and the body. If it is not for dynamic placeholders, the layout service works for only one level, not the hierarchical levels. So this is one of the customization where we have migrated all our simple placeholders to a dynamic placeholder. Coming to the app configuration dictionary, I will go in detail. Like you need to define your JSS app, and the start path has to be mapped as site path. And coming to the legacy system, this has been a simple item where your app start comes from. Now we have to render it from an JSS app. This is where your JSS app starts. And coming to the dictionary part, Sitecore layout service provides us a dictionary API. It uses this path and provide all the items, all the child items of this dictionary path as part of this service, and which is tightly integrated with the Sitecore powered React app or the JSS app by default. And coming to the layout service, we have two parts to it. One is the context data and the route data. Context is nothing but your current item data, whereas route is nothing but your presentation details along with the data sources of it. Coming to the extensions, like for our implementation, we need an item serializer. Sitecore by default provide an item serializer. Then why we need an extension? By default, onto the layout service, Sitecore exposes all the fields except the standard fields. Standard fields which starts with __. So in order, since our legacy system does have few fields which are used on the renderings, we have to customize this item serializer so that we allow all the fields or some of the fields which are needed for our requirement onto the front end. And we have to tap into the pipeline, the item serializer, and you can extend as needed. And to reduce the payload size, if you are using one field or two fields of a data source, there is not required to expose n number of fields. Or you want to read from a different data source, then this is the where you need to, item serializer is the where you need to extend your Sitecore of. Then coming to the field serializer, we use Killen as our DAM, which we connect with Sitecore. So we had extended Sitecore fields to consume this Killen data. Now Sitecore layout service doesn't understand our field data. So this is where the field serializer comes in. In short, item serializer is a combination of field serializers and the JSS placeholder transformer. Now coming to the field serializers, you can tap into the field serializer extension, and you can write, you can produce your own outcome or the JSON outcome which is required. Similarly, the media field serializer is, if you have some business logic pertaining to the multi-list field or some other link fields, you can tap into these serializers and you can extend as needed. Now, Sitecore layout service, as I discussed, has two parts. One is the context data and the other is the route data. And what refers what? If you want context data to be extended, like for OZ, SEO, or cookie policy or some notification parts to it, and you want to be across the app, this is where you can add all your data, kind of for Open Graph or SEO or notifications as in the screen. You can tap into this extension part and you can customize the JSON body as required. And the route data by default, Sitecore provide 6 different serializers. One is the data source, like my page has few set of layouts and the presentations. By default, data serializer is mapped, and you can map or onto your layout or the queue definition inside Sitecore. You can remap them to any of the serializers, or you can define your own custom serializers. How does this work? And what do we mean by custom serializers is, like I have a third party data which my view or a controller is consuming of. Now I am migrating from my MVC to JSS. How do I do it? Is what the custom serializers provide us. You can define your own custom serializer. You can define your own custom serializers inside Sitecore and map your view rendering to this custom serializers. Till date, if you are using an MVC based application, you mention your placeholders as part of CSS/HTML. Now those has to be mapped onto your rendering or the JSON rendering, which is part of the Sitecore. And apart from it, on the route data, you can transform your placeholders. You can add as many as resolvers as you want or as your page needs. Coming to the layout, before to JSS, it's like we are mapping with the path of the CSS/HTML. Now post JSS, you need to change it to normal layout or transform your normal layout into JSS layout, and you need to attach all your placeholders in the layout service placeholder. All these placeholders will get exposed as part of your layout service. And each and every rendering has to be mapped. By default, data source resolver is mapped, but if you want to customize it as per our need, you can map it with a custom resolver by defining it into a Sitecore resolvers. That's it.
In the bit where you're talking about the kind of the topologies for deploying these things, in both of your examples, you had the node service running on the content management server.
Yeah.
Is that a fixed requirement, or is that just a common deployment pattern?
It's a common deployment pattern.
But you could split it out
Yes,
if you
we can.
wanted to.
What were like the biggest challenges you had that you didn't foresee?
The base challenges, firstly with the dynamic placeholder, which I had rightly mentioned that there was no clue that it will work only for one single hierarchy.
Yeah.
And the performance, that's where we have to analyze these topologies. Firstly, we had integrated with the integrated topology, but due to performance issues, we have to migrate it to the CDN.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you put it on the edge.
Yeah.
Cache it. Yeah.
To go through this process, you had a client delivered MVC site. At the end of this process, what were the real world realized benefits?
It's the page load. Okay. My client is on AngularJS, which is the legacy one.
Yep.
So they want to move it out, firstly.
Yes.
And they had attained lot of page speed and the SEO benefits out of this project.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's because I'm looking at a very similar process, and the ultimate like driving aim is so page speed, so page speed. So you did realize a lot of those benefits. Yeah. Okay.
And power to front end developers. Power to front end.
Yeah. Which makes our job easier, right?
So from the development perspective, did it take more time for developers, or it was just only first of them? It took, I don't know, 3 times longer than typical VC development?
No, it rather took less time because everything is JSON now with JSS, and front end are more powered now with this JSS.
So it's easier to develop
Yes.
something.
How long was spent on the migration?
With the references then, it took 3 months. It was not that easy with identifying these resources, or then it's an year back which we had migrated.
Would you mind what version was it? Because you said underscore standard that you had.
It was on 9.3.
Is it? These are the things that you don't have in 9.8 onwards in GitLab.
Yeah.
Dynamic service was a must.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of components installed already? how many-ish did you have to
Around 60 components.
in 3 months? How big?
It's like we are previously of controller renderings, which is of repository pattern.
Okay, yeah.
So what happens was you just need in the layout service, you just need to add some reference and all the same method.
Okay. That's pretty good going stuff.
That is rapid.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So someone's going to talk about discover or reflection. It's not called that anymore.
No reflections.
No. Yeah, cool.
Okay. All right, guys. So I'm Sumit. I think quite a few number of you guys know me, but if not, then I've been product manager for Sitecore for, I think, now don't count anymore, that many years. Started XP, so that was my baby. Then what he was talking about, so I was connectors and integrations. So that thing that he was flashing was kind of my product also, along others. But I think the idea was not that good enough because of synchronization issues, etc., etc. So we parked that product to place. Maybe EPAM is handling that nowadays. And then recently I picked up CDP, but I'm not talking about CDP today. I would love to, and I think could be more talks. I like the presentation which Shanif did, and the partner, training that we have. I will be exposing that to you guys also to try out CDP. But I'm going to talk about Discover. Anyone heard about Discover before? Okay, anyone touched Discover before? No one touched it. So it would be nice, although Alex said it's a 20-minute talk and I have 80 slides, Alex. So let's just lock the door, bring more beer and stay here for the next hour or something, yeah? But what I'll do is I'll actually skip through a lot of slides, so I'll do a lot of introductory stuff. And then we're planning to do another event in London, we come back and we do touch it a little bit more. So I would like you guys to touch it, yeah? So it's mostly what it is and why and how, yeah? Okay, how to get back? There you go. So what is Discover? Again, when we acquired this company, Reflection, that was Gartner actually termed us as a commerce search technology company. Yes, it was commerce search, which actually were doing personalization and digital commerce and also DXP at the same time. Then, lately, they actually changed what does commerce search mean, which actually changes what Discover also means. Yeah. So what Discover is a product discovery platform. Yeah. So it's mostly product, mostly commerce. If this is not something you're working on, you will soon be working on it because we're trying to sell a lot. hence this talk. So we acquired them almost a year ago. So the sales from Sitecore has been pushing this to everyone who's it's very close to Order Cloud also. So sometimes it goes in combination with Order Cloud. So what does that mean by product discovery platform? It actually does search. It has merchandising. At the same time, it has browsing of your catalog, etc., etc., with capability of SEOs, product and recommendation. Yeah, and then you can tag stuff with that. So that's what Gartner is, and this is why we bought it, because we want to sit in the Gartner quadrant for the product discovery category. Yeah, important for us, because we would like to then implement